So I'm Anne Ostruda. I'm a senior lecturer in biology and science communication and biology. And I've got an overarching role for public engagement in the faculty and also the university. And as part of that, I offer these kind of training sessions for social media, online engagement. And I thought from experience of previous sessions, I'll ask what people hope to get out of the session. And I put the answers on here. So it was gaining followers for my blog, an overview and a specific focus on Twitter, how academics have been using LinkedIn, would like to build my presence a little bit, but also kind of hate that sort of stuff, which is a very common thing. It's hating it or not having the time or feeling like there's a pressure to do social media, but not, so how do you do it time efficiently? Second job as a coach in the academy at Chelsea FC, and subsequently our social media channels are quite heavily scrutinized, so I have to be careful about that aspect of my social media usage, which is really interesting, and dives into that question of kind of how, do you have a professional and a private profile, or do you have everything in one account, and if you have everything in one account, how personal should you be or shouldn't you be? Use it for engagement for both teaching and research activities and getting greater attention profile, a general way to effectively communicate to students, and also what Brooks thinks about social media, what the policy is, what you have to be careful with. Just interested what other people do in social media, whether I can steal any ideas, which is always a good one. And that's why I started a sharing board where you can put your own existing accounts on there and you can see how other people in the faculty are using social media and follow each other. And if you haven't put your account on there yet, you can do that at the end as well. And also, I really like that one. In some ways, I don't know what I don't know, so an overview would be helpful as well. So all of these are really, really good points and points I've been doing previously, but it shows you how difficult it is to run a good social media session. Because people come in with very different backgrounds. So they might come in with not having used social media at all, to already having quite a lot of experience. Often it's different kind of technical levels. So from just having dipped a little bit the toe into Twitter to having a really broad overview and wanting to know how to use it efficiently. But also topically, so it's from research, student engagement, personal profiles. And I looked at it and I thought, how can I synthesize all of that to make a session where everybody gets something out of it, which is challenging. And I thought about it, and actually this morning I came up with a bit of a bigger picture. And that's what I hope that you get out of this session, that social media might sometimes seem like this overwhelming accumulation of new sites and tools and things we have to do and things we have to learn and settings you have to be in charge of and so on. And it takes a lot of time to then learn the new network, and you don't know, is it worth doing, is it not doing? But if you step back, all of these new sites are just tools in the toolkit, and social media as such has two purposes. So the first reason to use social media is because it gives you the power to create change. And I'm really excited because I always wanted to give a kind of TED-style talk with the TED-style slides in the yellow, and it's yes, I finally got there now. So, and apologies if it sounds a bit like these self-help books, The Power of the Universe and the Attraction and the Law of Attraction, but it is really true. So think about social media as something that gives you the power to create change, and change might be positive or it might be negative. And it's being aware of that, whatever you use it for. And the second, and I feel really, really strongly about that, is the joy of serendipity, or a less poetic word, randomness. So it's the randomness of networks and the randomness of getting to know people that you wouldn't have met or got to know otherwise. And it's doing that not only for yourself, but also for others. And that's maybe the next level. Once you started using social media for yourself, how you then use it as a tool to do the same for your students or for other researchers that you train. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences with social media to show you some examples. So I thought back how I started using social media, and my usual first slide in these talks is from 2009, but actually it goes back much further, and it goes back to when I first used the internet, and that was 1998 when I did a practical in a big pharmaceutical company, Roche, in a very small town in Germany, in Penzberg. And because I was just an A-level student freshly out of school, I had long periods of break, and they allowed me to use the company computer and to look at the internet. So I went on Yahoo, and somehow there were categories for personal homepages, and suddenly I was on this homepage of a similarly aged teenager in Brazil who had written about what he's doing, and I thought, that's amazing that I, as a German A-level, freshly a graduate A-level student in Germany, am able to read about the life of this random person in Brazil. So, joy of serendipity. So that made me then make my own homepage, which at the time was really basic. I don't know if anybody remembers times of GeoCities and these very basic homepages. So I made my own homepage, and I won a competition in a German women's magazine. I didn't even enter the competition. The editor approached me and said, well, I saw your homepage and I really liked it, would you like to enter? And these were the pictures. So you see, it was like a primitive Facebook almost. I put pictures of myself as a baby, my cat, a park. Some of my pictures I had taken from my holidays. Of course, Facebook didn't exist yet. But it wasn't great, and yet at the time it was so new that I won the second prize, which was an HP scanner. So that was very exciting. And then I got an email from one of my old school friends from where I had grown up, because she in the waiting room of HP had seen the article and had seen my homepage and found me. So again, serendipity. So, and raising your profile. So that was like an indication of the power that the internet would have later. So skip forward to 2009, and at my PhD graduation, my colleagues gave me what sounded like a little poem about my study subject, which was the Golgi apparatus. And I googled it, and I found it was the lyrics of a song about the Golgi apparatus, written by a US high school band. So I approached them and asked, can we use your song and put our microscopy videos over it, because it might be fun to show to our students as an engagement tool in lectures. And they said, yeah, they were really excited being approached by scientists. So we did that. We had this really geeky song. We put our videos on there. And I thought, well, if our students like it, maybe students from other universities would like it. And I just put it on YouTube. And at the time, that was highly unusual, and it raised a few eyebrows why I would do that. And suddenly, we got comments from students, but they weren't university students, they were US high school students whose teachers had found the song and played it in their class, and they used it for their homework and so on. And then it got 10,000 hits, it got 20,000 hits, and that's massive for a niche subject of plant cell biology. So, inspired by that, we put up a whole music channel with music cell biology videos, and the aim was to bring very recent, very current cell biology, plant cell biology, into classrooms. Because plant cell biology is a subject that's usually taught very, very dry, students hate it, and putting the music to it, it's very, very catchy. If you listen to it, it's in your head immediately. Putting the cartoons on it made the students memorize the facts about the vacuole, the Golgi apparatus. And that was the one time I came closest to feeling like a rock star when there was a school coming in and they realized they had listened to the Golgi apparatus video and I had made it, and they were all really impressed. And so that's then the change, so that they then wrote, we were singing this in the canteen, and then the other students thought we were really geeky. You get students to sing geeky plant cell biology songs about your subject. And that's something that without social media and YouTube wouldn't have been possible, because you can't go with a marching band into every class and play the Golgi song. So the whole channel has, I think, over, I don't know how much it has in total, probably close to 100,000 views, which again is a lot for this niche subject. So I I really liked YouTube, I was blogging, I had my own website, plantcellbiology.com, where I had a similar aim. So I wanted to inspire students to take up plant cell biology, and I wanted to show plants aren't boring, it's really interesting. I did a series of careers interviews with plant scientists. So I had a series called Phases on Plant Cell Biology. But I never saw the point of Twitter, because why would you want to tweet about what you had for lunch or where you went on holiday? And then I got a bursary in 2011 to go to the Science Communication Conference, which had an online theme, so online communication. And I didn't know anyone because I was a biologist, and all of these were journalists, PR people, science communicators. And at the sign up for the conference, they asked for your Twitter handle, and the conference had a hashtag. And I thought, oh, that might be useful, because then I can get to know people beforehand, because I don't want to be the one standing in the corner of that really busy conference not knowing anyone. So I signed up, I followed a few people beforehand, so I went on the hashtag. And then I could go to people and say, oh, we've already talked on Twitter. And I still follow these people 9 years later, and I've made these connections. And Twitter has brought that randomness, that serendipity into my life. And that's why I don't like ResearchGate, because ResearchGate is promoted as the Facebook for scientists, and apart from the whole issues it has with copyright, of uploading full text papers and so on, it's a very close community. So you sign up when you're a researcher or a scientist, or there's something similar for Academia Edu. You talk to your colleagues, but you don't really get to know new people, whereas with Twitter it's very easy to talk to other networks like teachers, journalists, other disciplines, stakeholders or users of your research that you normally wouldn't have that access to. I've learned most of the things I know about diversity issues, racism, inclusion from Twitter just by following people who have a voice on social media that they normally wouldn't have in like our traditional media. And that serendipity is one of the big values of networks like Twitter. So one thing that happened was that in 2012, I put out a random idea because I was frustrated about reading some of papers in my field that I didn't understand, and I said, I just tweeted, what if all papers had an outreach section that had like an accessible summary of the paper, and also links to resources that the authors had made. And I was thinking, for example, like the organelle songs. So just that you could understand them more easily. And that tweet got retweeted by quite a lot of people. And someone called Chris Gunter approached me, who at the time, she was the ex-editor of, I can't remember, I think, Nature, something, quite a high impact publication, and then worked as director of a research institute. And she said she really liked it, and she just got a column space at Genome Biology, and if I wanted to work with her on a column on this. So me tweeting about this resulted in an actual publication where we both wrote, and it starts with the idea for this column started with a tweet. And so we write about this, we propose how this would work, and so on and so on. Again, I never would have met her without Twitter. I then wrote a BBSSC grant proposal with someone who is a nanotechnologist, and he was working on the same things like I did in principle, only that he did it in vitro, looking at lipids, and I looked at the same system in plants with the Golgi apparatus. And again, we wouldn't have met because we publish in very different journals, we go to very different conferences, and just by looking at his profile and reading his tweets, I realized he was studying protein-mediated self-assembly of lipids, and I thought, wait, that's the same thing what my subject is. So we met, we put it together, we wrote a grant. It didn't get funded, obviously, it was the last on the bottom. But all the reviewers commented on the interdisciplinarity of the grant and of the team. And sometimes I think academics like to say, oh, we're working interdisciplinarily, but it's really not interdisciplinarily. For example, in plants, it might be plant cell biology and plant pathology. That's not interdisciplinarity. That's really, really close together. Real interdisciplinary is if you've got a plant scientist and an economist or a physicist, where you struggle to talk to each other because you speak so different languages. And being on social media really helps making these connections and also practicing having to tweet in a way that other people understand you, or write in a way that other people understand you. I wrote a paper about social media because at that time I was seen as an expert suddenly, so I started giving training sessions and talk like this on conferences. So it's the value and use of social media as communication from the plant sciences. It was at one point in the top 100 of highly accessed papers of BMC, which is the whole platform. It's had over 50,000 accesses. And while it's not on the traditional metrics of citations, it wouldn't count as, oh, this is like a referable thing. It has had a huge impact and is still cited by plant scientists who promote social media and why it's good. And so from all of that, I was appointed as the editor-in-chief of what's now called Botany One. And that was about 2 years ago. So at the time, it was the weblog associated with a journal, a scientific plant journal, Annals of Botany. And so it's a charity that publishes 2 scientific journals, and they wanted to have the weblog to have its own editor and have more of its own independent identity. And so they appointed me to it. And suddenly I think it's probably one of the first, I call it not digital magazines in its own kind, but OUP is using it as an example of how journals could use social media efficiently, because it's so new what we're doing. So we post accessible summaries of the papers that are published in the 2 journals, but we're also now approaching, or we always have approached, scientists who wrote about the subjects in general, who wrote about career stories, conference reports, and so on. And if you look at that page, thinking about the power to create change, this one is a story by a master's student about her transition from her decision she made in her undergrad degree going to postgrad, going to MSc in industry. So the purpose of that post is to inspire undergrads in their decision making and show them a career path into plant science. That post is actually written by a work experience student from Brookes who did her work experience with Botany One. And so we're using this as a tool for her to practice science communication. And with that, she's had articles published. These are some book reviews. And a lot of scientists who submit their drafts and articles have never written for a blog. And in fact, I changed the name on purpose because blogging has quite a negative connotation to it. I don't know how it's in your discipline, it depends on disciplines. I think in the arts it might be more accepted, but if you ask a scientist, do you want to blog, that will be the very, very last thing on their thing. If you say, I've got a blog, they look at you like, why aren't you writing ransom papers? Why are you wasting your time? So I, on purpose, use writing for impact. We now call it a digital magazine because what you are doing is you are writing for impact to disseminate your research in language that more people can understand to create wider impact and change. So, okay, so what do you share? That's a usual question. And I've had a lot of people say, I don't know what to share, my life isn't interesting, or I don't know if it's suitable. And again, if you're a researcher, I think you tend to trivialize your day-to-day. And I say, it doesn't stop millions of people to tweet who really don't have anything interesting to say, first of all. Donald Trump now is tweeting, so nobody has an excuse now not to tweet. And really, what we are doing is really interesting and is very relevant. It might just be, it's in such high terms that we think it's too complex, but then it's our challenge to put it into less complex terms. Or we should reflect on stepping back and thinking, what is it that makes our job so interesting and diverse? And I'm going to go back a bit on the online profile and raising your own profile, because that was the title of the session. So if you've got a public social networking account like Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, I would recommend to keep it professional, and that doesn't mean that you can't say anything personal. So I know some colleagues just tweet links, And I think that can be a bit boring. The people I like following most are the ones that tell little stories or anecdotes, or where you see their personality, their humor. But you need to feel comfortable to do so, and you probably, maybe you start off being a bit more neutral and then you ease a bit into finding your voice. And most importantly, you need to think about your use and your audience and the purpose, what you're using the network for. And I don't say social media because different sites have different purposes. So for example, LinkedIn I use for professional networking, and I wouldn't use the humor on LinkedIn that I use on Twitter. Whereas on Twitter I see myself as a role model, as scientists are humans too, which is really important. So like I'm just a normal person, so I would tweet about my cats or my knitting or pictures of Oxford. I also tweet a little bit of politics, so if I'm annoyed about Brexit, I would tweet that because, again, to show we are humans. If you want to disseminate your research, that might be a different purpose, so you might focus on your research rather than your person, but it depends, and your different accounts might have different purposes as well.
Can I ask about that?
Yes.
So if my purpose is to have people, the scientific community, more aware of my own research, to get more citations to my papers, etc., which type of account would you suggest using, or how would you do that?
If you want more citations, I would probably use something open. And so my favorite is Twitter, just because it has such power with the reach of other people sharing it and resharing it. I would probably use Twitter and LinkedIn and also put it on ResearchGate. So what you're then trying to do is you're trying to optimize the reach of your research and also get it to people who don't know your work. Because I guess you've got your close field of people who already know your work, and you know they might cite you, but if you want to get more citations, you have to reach new audiences and convince other people what your work is about, what the value of your work is and how it relates to other disciplines maybe. So in that case, some kind of additional explanation or storytelling, or saying this isn't only relevant for that, but also for that, probably. Sometimes you need to go where your audience is. So if you think your work is also relevant, so what's your discipline?
Politics, psychology.
Psychology. So if you think your work is relevant to teachers, then you might actually tweet at or share at a teacher hub or a teacher association and say, this is my paper, this is relevant because would you consider sharing it with other people? Because you wouldn't expect all the teachers to come to your Twitter account, so you would have to think about ways. Could you write something for a teacher's blog, or could you? So it's how can you get your work to where your audience is? And that's one of the problems, or one of the challenges we have with Botany One. One of the assumptions we have is that the public reads our tweets and Facebook posts, and that's a big assumption, because I guess realistically at the moment it's mostly read by plant scientists. But again, that's the first step, because if you've got the scientists on board, then they will hopefully share it, and that then reaches non-scientists and non-friends. So that kind of amplifying effect of social media is important as well. And generally, if you want to raise your profile, or if you want to sell yourself in your research, and that's already where a lot of especially women then say, oh, I find it really hard to sell myself and to promote myself. Think about the achievements. And that might be something like an award, you got a new job, you got a qualification, you graduated, you did some outreach. It could also be your reflections or insights or thoughts on a topic. To students, I normally say, if you feel you don't have any achievements, maybe that's something to reflect on and strategically do some things that you can tweet about. And you don't have to do it in a boasting way. And if you look at Twitter, for example, people say things like, I'm very honored to receive this, or I'm delighted that my abstract has been accepted for this conference. So you don't have to say, I'm the best because I'm doing this. But there are ways to phrase it to be humble and yet say, I am speaking at this conference, or I am presenting my research here. And then you put it on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. So You don't use LinkedIn and Twitter just for using LinkedIn and Twitter. You think about your achievements or your content, and then you put it on there. So you do something, which is your research project, your outreach, your conference, your talk, your thinking, you create some kind of content or output. You communicate it, which might be a paper, an article, a blog post, a podcast, a video. Sometimes it might be a post on LinkedIn or Twitter again. So sometimes your social media platform is your writing platform. Sometimes it's just a vehicle for sharing it. Yes?
The previous slide did show that you then put it on LinkedIn, blogs and so on.
Yeah, sorry, that's the next.
Do you have them all connected? Because you can connect Twitter with Facebook, with whatever else you want.
I don't connect them because there's so different audiences that I think it's not appropriate for me to automatically put my Twitter on the Facebook and the other way around.
So you make different ones for each social...
So my Facebook is very private and I only have a very restricted circle of friends, and I use it more like a private diary / blog or sharing pictures, whereas Twitter is very, very professional, where I share work, things, and I also use a different kind of humor on Twitter, probably more sarcastic than I would on Facebook. So I definitely wouldn't connect the two. I also tweet more than I post on Facebook. That's another thing, the frequency. And that then builds up your professional online identity. If you think about other content you have, it might be images, it might be audio files, it might be curating resources. And in the past I used to say there were these Delicious or Bundler, it might be Pinterest. So if you have a good pack of resources, for example, for students, or good resources about writing or or coaching or whatever, that's worth sharing because not many people might have these, and again it will give you the reputation of being an expert because you're having resources to train others or to develop others. And of course your publications and your CV, and that's then more LinkedIn ResearchGate. So I wouldn't put my CV on Twitter every week, but I would put it on LinkedIn. Really important is help others to find you, and that's my profile at the moment. It changes, but I think about keywords that others might type in to find me. And that would be, for example, biology, plants, science communication. I leave in Oxford Brookes because I want to leave it in, some people leave it out. It's a personal decision again. I put in the editor-in-chief. I put in easily in use because I am, and that's the personal. So I want to show I'm not just a very professional. And then views are my own. There's a bit of debate if you should or shouldn't put it in. I chose to put it in just because I'm representing 2 or 3 organizations in the first part of my profile, and it seems safer to then leave it in. Some people have these cryptic quotes in your profile, and while it seems quirky to have it, it makes it harder for others to judge if they should follow you or not, especially if you come up in a list of people and you just see the short blurbs. And if you think about how much information is competing for our attention, you really want to, that's like the 10-second pitch of your profile. Should someone follow you or shouldn't follow you? And if you don't show others that you're relevant to your interests, then they probably won't follow you. So in that, if I've got that in my profile, I can be pretty sure that other plant scientists and other biologists and other science communication people will follow me just because they know they've got the same interests. How do you build your online network? So use the search function for your keywords, go through your contacts friends list, that's a good way, stealing your others. There are curated lists, so Twitter allows you to create lists, and I'm curating lists of the faculty tweeters, which you can access. If you go to my Twitter profile, there's a button called lists, and there are all kinds of lists. You can put together accounts into your own list. So for example, if you want to make sure you're not missing your colleagues' tweets, you can sort them in a list and then check this separately. You can also embed lists into Moodle. So if you want to do Twitter with your students, you could have a list and put it into Moodle. Or if you want to have a subject-specific list of accounts, you can put that into Moodle. And you can do the same thing with relevant hashtags. So if they're with nurses, if they forgot the hashtag, I think it's renurses, can remember what it is, you could embed that hashtag into Moodle to show students there's this current chat going on in your profession. And hashtags are, like conference hashtags, a great way to find people with related interests as well.
So when you embed it, does it just create a link that opens up a separate page, or does it have a feed?
It's got a feed. So if you want to do it, I'm sure Irmgard or I can show you, but there are also instructions online. You have to create what's called a widget, and there's a certain series of steps you take to get the HTML code on the Twitter page.
Right.
And then you can copy and paste the HTML code into a block on the Moodle page. And you can either have it in the right bar, so it's there all the time, or you can have it in a subsection, and then you have to feed the actual stream on there.
Can I ask a bit of it sounds paranoid, but if I was to set up something like that and someone on the internet used one of the hashtags in a really offensive racist tweets, would I be in any way responsible for that being put on this page for the students on Moodle? Because I've created that list of tweets.
You wouldn't be responsible, but you couldn't change it, you couldn't take it out.
You can't edit it, and it's just, so it just hasn't, but it's understood by the university that that's not something that's within our control, I'm assuming.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And if that happened, I would probably, what you can do is you can report and block the tweeter, and then hope that Twitter deactivates the account. And if Twitter deactivates the account, it will disappear from your list.
Okay.
And what I then would do is I would probably hide the stream until that's sorted out.
Yeah. Okay.
And then put it back on. But I don't think they would hold you responsible personally. But I would try to like minimize the effect that has.
Okay.
So always remember that everyone will be able to read your public posts at all times. Sometimes they might be out of context, and I'm just going to skip these because I want to discuss a little bit. So when you post anything on a public network, imagine how it would look like if it's taken out of context, out of your Twitter stream, into a separate publication. For example, my tweet here ended up in a Storyfy, which was like the best of 75 tweets about a funny topic, how methods in a paper would be written if they were honestly written. And that then was read by 250,000 people. And it made me really think, would this really reflect badly on me or the university? And it wouldn't, but others wrote something like, oh, the statistics were fudged, and there was a big blow up because out of context it made them look as if they were actually doing it. And there was a similar story of PhD students tweeting something, oh, they did this, it's wrong, and then they ended up in an editorial on the front page of the Times Higher Education magazine, and the head of departments reading about their PhD students in that out of context thing, which is suddenly read by lots of senior higher education people. So would your tweet that's written in a very funny, informal environment be perceived the same if it suddenly was on the front page editorial of Times Higher Education magazine read by your vice chancellor? That's a good kind of measure to keep in mind.
How does that correspond with your tendency of being sarcastic on Twitter?
I think you have to take. I hope that I think if you have some knowledge about jokes, it's like you should punch up, you shouldn't punch down, you shouldn't be sarcastic about students or your colleagues. If you're sarcastic, try to be sarcastic about yourself. And I do follow, and I'm followed by quite a lot of senior people from the university and others, so that helps thinking how your tweet would be perceived. But I do think if you are public and if you want to show a bit of personality, that sometimes comes with a bit of risk, and I'm happy to take that risk. So
I think because I follow you and read your tweets, I don't think that you ever are really sarcastic, and that's quite good actually, because I had to write a page for students about netiquette, and there we said explicitly that sarcasm doesn't translate well in social media because it's too interpretable.
Yeah. Maybe it's the definition of sarcastic.
It's just what you write is amusing, it's funny sometimes, but I never discovered really harsh sarcasm.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not sure, I think that brings us to the Brooks, social media at Brooks digital policy. So there's a page, digital standards. If you want, I can send around the slides, so you can click on the links. And they've got guidelines, and they've got a social media policy. And there's a bit of a difference if you use social media personally, or if you've got an account that has a Brooks logo, or that is something like the Functional Food Center or Brooks HLS. And I think if you have an official Brooks account, you've got more responsibility than if you just have your personal account. Or would you agree with that, Irmgard?
Most definitely.
So, act responsibly, remember you are a representative of the university. And because I've got Oxford Brookes University in my profile, that's something I keep in mind. If I wouldn't have it in my profile, I've seen other people, other academics who don't have the university in their profile. But then even so, it doesn't protect you of consequences. So even if they don't have it in there, I don't know what would happen if they would be sarcastic. I don't really like use your common sense, because we all have so different values and things, and what if somebody is sarcastic and thinks it's okay and others think it's not okay. So I would be careful if you use your common sense, but I think as you would in the rest of your day-to-day work and communications, I guess it's what you say that to a person's face is a good review, and it's easy to say things online that we wouldn't say to someone's face. Don't post, it says do not share personal details of current students, but I would say don't post anything about students unless it's really positive, like I'm really proud of our students today for having worked so hard. Because occasionally there are these threads of people, academics complaining about students, and they always end up negatively for the academics, for punching down on the students and so on. So I wouldn't do that. Once you post something online, it's almost impossible to remove it. Check the accuracy of what you're posting. If you're unsure, don't post it. And if you have any doubts, don't post it. I think that's a good rule. If you write something that you hesitate and you've got kind of a strange feeling or there's a red flag, just don't post it. That's a good one. Or you can ask someone, do you think this is okay? Should I post this? I think, yeah, that's my last slide. So if you've got any questions now or anything specifically you would like to talk about, we can do that now.
Where you say if you post something online, it's almost impossible to remove it. Are there any circumstances when you can remove it?
I think it might be if you post something, like sometimes I've tweeted something and then I've deleted it half an hour later. So if nobody took a screenshot of it, then I guess it's possible to remove it again. But then even then it might depend if the search machine already indexed it, and it might already be in the search machine. So I would probably assume it might already be online, and as well, yeah.
But when somebody else retweeted it, the retweet, does that get deleted as well?
It depends, I think, if they just retweeted it or if they have a comment. So if they retweet with a comment, I think it says the tweet has been deleted, but the comment is still there. Yeah.
So let's say I'm a newbie, to the Twitter, and I want to be present in Twitter, more than, in addition to what I have in ResearchGate and LinkedIn. And you say that the benefits of Twitter is to establish networking. So how would other people come to me? I mean, what would I need to post, or what would make them draw to my profile to show them that I'm...
So there are three things. The first one is you follow other people first, and then they get a notification saying you followed them, and then they will check either just your profile blurb or your Twitter stream, and they will decide if you're interesting or not to follow back. And that's the contrast to Facebook, that you don't have to follow people back. So you have to make your profile interesting to get people to follow you. The second thing is if people search for you. So for example, with the Botany One account, I search sometimes for plant science just to see who we haven't followed yet. Or if somebody is looking for colleagues from Brooks Uni, they might type in Brooks University and then find other Brooks University tweeters. And that's why it's important to put your keywords into your profile that others can find you. So thinking reverse. And the third is to post something really interesting that gets shared and then others follow you because you said something really interesting. That's probably the hardest thing to do. Actually, no, the fourth is to give things like training sessions, because then people follow you because you did the training session. So I gained quite a bit of followers through that.
What about hashtags?
Yeah, tweeting under hashtags, but again, it depends on the hashtag. I think conference hashtags you're more likely to pick up people because it's a smaller thing and people want to network at conferences. But if it's a big hashtag like The Apprentice or TV thing, I don't think people go there to follow others. They just go there to join the conversation. So it depends.
I was going to ask, I haven't really spoken about it very much. As I understand, students on more of the sports programs engage a lot with Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do much on Instagram?
Personally, I do a little bit. With the Botany One account, we've started to post the papers on Instagram, so we put a picture of the paper and then the text. I think it's got potential big reach, but for me it's not the right platform because it doesn't tie in that much with what I want to achieve. I think if I was a lifestyle blogger or that I might be using it more.
I just feel like, I'm going to use this term loosely, but our generation use Twitter, and I feel like the students' generation aren't really using Twitter that much anymore.
I would say it's not generational, but it's the professional versus personal, and I think we assume, from my experience, we assume that the younger generation, the students, are these digital natives and they're all social media savvy, but they're not. And if you ask them, they all use Instagram, but they use it personally to stay in touch with their friends and to share pictures. And that's why I wouldn't use Instagram for networking, because that's my personal space as well. So I don't really do professional stuff on there. Even though I follow Brooke's accounts, I don't use it the same. Whereas with Twitter, I use it professionally, and the students don't use it professionally because they're only starting to think about themselves as professionals. Well, the ones we have, it might be different with more mature programs. And so one of the things I haven't talked about is I've got a whole coursework designed around asking students to use Twitter in groups to curate biotechnology-themed accounts to give them that professional identity and teach them how do you curate a professional account. So in some way, maybe we don't need to go into all of the spaces like Instagram and Snapchat and where the students are privately, but maybe rather think about how do we teach them to use the professional spaces better, like LinkedIn and Twitter. So that's my thinking.
When you say you post pictures of the journals on Instagram, does that work well? Do the students then engage with it?
We only started with the Instagram, and we do get likes. I don't know if it's students, it might be just scientists, but we even don't know if people read the whole blurb. They might just like the picture because it's a pretty picture. So, I mean, that's what I do. I don't read all the blurbs because there's so much information. I like to like the picture.
One more question. I know you're very busy, but you're still super active on social media. How do you do that? Because also you mentioned that one should think a little bit before just pressing post. And I can't imagine how to fit all that into a normal day's work, for example.
I think, well, some of it is doing it on my smartphone, so I don't do it, so I would do it on the go or on the bus, so kind of finding these little gaps. But the other, I think, is practice, and actually I don't know if the statistic is still true, but I think I once read that it's 1% of people are content creators, 10% are sharing content, and the rest are just consuming it. And so maybe it's making that step from just being on Twitter and read, which a lot of people are, which is fine, to starting to retweet things, and then in your head switching to creating content. It's a skill to see content and then to convert it into little bits. And I think once you start with it, it can be quite addictive. So you see something and you put it into these now 280 characters, or you see a picture. And also remembering to capture it. And maybe it is because I like to document things. I take pictures regularly anyway, and other people don't. Maybe you could, I think you have your picture a day mission, isn't it? So maybe you could set yourself a goal to post one picture or one tweet per day, even if it's just a little snapshot. So it doesn't have to be always a big thing, it might just be the one thing you learned, or the one thing you achieved, or the one thing you want to achieve today. And that gets you into that almost routine of, in a way, creating content on social media is like reflecting and then putting your reflection into words. It's being aware of what you're doing and sharing what you're doing. It's not that far away from us teaching, I guess, or like lecturing or writing. So it's not too big of a jump. It's just recognizing that social media is another tool other than writing a paper or.
I think it becomes a bit addictive. But it's like, I don't know, I've never played Candy Crush, but you know, as people play those kind of games and stuff, and you make time to do that, and it's like, and because Twitter's so quick, sometimes I'm watching television and then the ad comes on and I just, because I've got a low boredom threshold, I go and play on that for 5 minutes.
Well,
And I
yeah,
think, oh yeah, I have to say something. But I also think at conferences it's a sort of.
But then I'm thinking, we feel like we have to defend ourselves to constantly be on Twitter, but nobody defends themselves for reading a book or a newspaper. So there's still, because it's that novelty of networking, I think there is still a bit of, it's that new thing, and then you're addicted to your smartphone. But then, well, am I addicted to connecting with others and reading others' thoughts? Well, I don't mind being addicted to that. So I could say that.
Can you really put your thoughts or your research idea or everything in 140 characters?
It depends how you define your research, and if you would tweet about your recent paper or just your field in general, but if and what your audience was, but you can, and of course you can also add links. So
And it's no longer 140.
it's 140.
Yes, it's more now, it's twice as much.
And you can make these threads where you reply to your own tweet and reply again to your own tweet. So it's a thread, it's a bit like a discussion forum.
Can I give this book a plug?
Sorry?
I give this book a...
I think I get it myself. Are the students outside? Yeah, I
Alright.
think we have to finish. Anyway, if you want to take a picture of these accounts,
Can you hold the picture in front of the camera?
yeah, hold the photo in front of the camera.
Thank you.
Okay. I just found it really useful in terms of answering some of the questions and about how to create that profile and particularly the time. I'm sure it was really good. Well, I had to be virtual booked in.
Well, thank you for coming, and take some lunch away if you haven't done so yet.